Welcome to the Black Biblist channel. You know, Black Americans, Black foundational Americans are survivalists and thrivalists. So I'm the Black Biblist. I'm here to tell a story. But today's topic is African Union tethers to foundational Black Americans reparations. Ain't that something? Man, that's some shit, ain't it? Well, we're gonna get into this. That's a mess. We're gonna get into it. That's disrespectful for our 200,000 Black and proud soldiers that saved the Union. They fought and died. 40,000 Black foundational American ancestors died fighting for freedom. And now you want to tether on to foundational Black Americans reparations. You know, they fought and died for reparations. 40,000 of them died. They stood on business, not like the Africans. Not like the Africans. We're going to get into the story, though. We're going to get into this story. You know, Representative Lee, on the 15th of May, she reintroduced a bill for reparations. And so the world is seeing movement in reparations. You know, the Caribbean have their own reparations. And so what I'm saying is that is very, very disrespectful to the 200,000 foundational Black ancestors who actually fought and died for reparations. Now we have the African Union talking about tethering on, disrespecting our foundational Black American ancestors, stating that they want to be in charge. They want to negotiate. They want to negotiate our reparations. The same Africans, some of the tribes that sold us into slavery, but as a unit, as an African Union, and before the African Union was the AU, there has not been one case where they have went to the United Nations on our behalf. Okay, let's get into the history. This requires a history lesson for the world. When I say that these 200,000 Black American soldiers saved the Union, let's get into detail on how they did it. Okay, in 1861, the United States was plunged into a devastating civil war. And guess what? The South succeeded. Black Americans played a crucial role in this struggle. If it wasn't for them, there would not be a union. So let's go. Not only fighting for their freedom, but also for reparations and the rights guaranteed by the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. Let me give you a little background how they saved. When I say they saved the Union, the southern states seceded primarily to protect their economic interests tied to slavery. Abraham Lincoln took office in 1860. Fears grew among Southern leaders that the abolitionist movement would threaten their way of life. What is their way of life? Slavery. So, the attack on Fort Sumter in 1861 marked the beginning of a brutal war that would last 4 years. Know what they was fighting for? The fight for reparations. As the Civil War unfolded, the Union recognized the necessity of enlisting black soldiers to bolster their ranks. Now, this is what happened. In 1863, a lot of white men stopped volunteering. They stopped volunteering to fight. They were losing the war. So Lincoln and some of the abolitionists actually came to talk to Lincoln, said, look, the slaves are ready to fight. Let them fight. The slaves was begging to fight. So when the Union Army was in the South, they occupied a lot of the territory. There were black slaves, American slaves, walking off the plantation, running up to Union soldiers saying, we are ready to fight. And 200,000 of them joined. When white men didn't want to fight anymore. In fact, this is history. Check it out. In 1863, that was the first United States draft. They had to implement a draft because the numbers was low. The black American soldiers, they didn't have to be drafted. They went eagerly. To fight. So black men were eager to fight not only for the Union, but also for the promises made by the government, freedom, rights, and reparations for their sacrifices. The 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery, the 14th Amendment, which guaranteed citizenship to slaves and equal protection under the law, and the 15th Amendment, which aimed to secure voting rights, were seen as vital outcomes of their struggle. You understand? Now let's talk about the broken promises. Despite the sacrifices made, many black soldiers and their families were left disillusioned after the war. While the government made promises of land reparations, the reality was starkly different. The Homestead Act of 1862 allowed white settlers to claim 270 million acres of land, while black Americans were largely excluded from these opportunities. They were fighting a war, while European settlers was getting free land, 270 million. The economic and social disparities continued to widen, leaving black families in poverty. The role of black Americans, okay? These 200,000 black men enlisted in the Union Army, fighting valiantly in major battles and proving their courage. and commitment. Their participation was just about the war. It symbolized a fight for dignity, respect, and the right to claim their share of the American dream. Black soldiers faced discrimination and unequal treatment, yet they persevered, like always, determined to secure a better future for themselves and their descendants. We're the descendants, the descendants of freemen who our ancestors fought. And don't you bring some union, African Union, that have never did a damn thing. I shouldn't say never. They trying to do something now, but it's not for us. It's a trick. All right. And I wonder what the African Union is receiving. Some more mirrors and more little shiny gifts to undermine our fight for reparations right here in the United States. But let me go on. How we turned the tide. How these 200,000 the contributions Black soldiers were pivotal in key battles, including the Battle of Fort Wagner and the Siege of Petersburg. Okay, their bravery helped shift the tide of the war and underscored the importance of freedom, not for themselves, but for all Americans. And let me just wrap this up. Okay, the Civil War was a defining moment in American history, representing a struggle not only for the preservation of the Union, but also for the rights and dignity of Black foundational Americans, while the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments promised a new beginning. The reality of unfulfilled reparations and systematic inequality continue to challenge the nation. The legacy of those who fought, especially the 200,000 Black soldiers, remind us of the ongoing quest for justice and equality that persists in American society. So I want everybody to understand our struggle here, our history of fighting, our history for fighting for our rights. And we don't need African Union tethers to latch on our fight here, unless we ask you to, and nobody asked. More to come. African Union has indeed made reparations for the transatlantic slave trade and its ongoing impact on people of African descent a central theme for 2025. Check that out. That's interesting, isn't it? This includes a focus on justice for Africans and people of African descent, with reparations being a key aspect of their agenda. This is not a resolution to give reparations specifically to Black Americans. Let's stop it right there. But rather a broader call for reparatory justice for all people of African descent. Did you check that out? Let me read that again. This is not a resolution to give reparations specifically to Black Americans, but rather a broader call for reparatory justice for all people of African descent globally. Let's see how this works out. Let's see what else they're talking about. Now, here's a more detailed, they say, a theme for 2025. The African Union has designated justice for Africans and people of African descent through reparations as its theme for 2025. Now, they're trying to make this a global movement. This declaration signals a strengthened partnership between the AU and CARICOM. Let's just pause for a minute. CARICOM is the Caribbean fight for reparations. Now, said they partnership up with CARICOM. We're going to see how that works out. Because one thing that I want to let you know, that the CARICOM and the AU, they have the same colonizers, okay? But we're going to get into that later. Same colonizers that's telling them that they're not going to give them shit, basically. Let's go though. Highlighting a unified global effort to seek justice for Africans and people of African descent, according to United Nations News. Reparations beyond financial. We're gonna talk about this one. Reparations are envisioned not as a financial payments, but also a broader measures like a formal apology, land restitution, investment in communities, and cultural and institutional rebuilding. Now let's stop it right there. Right there is a problem, because foundational Black Americans here in the United States, we want financial, we want cash payments. The apology can come last. Apology without cash reparations is an empty apology. Okay? You got to repair the damage. Apology is not going to work without financial cash. Let's just get that straight. Okay. Now, they're trying to get this global fund. Okay? A global reparations fund is being proposed to facilitate these efforts with a focus on the African continent, according to United Nations News. Well, we're not, Foundation Black Americans is not on the African continent right now. What is the AU going to give 50 million foundational Black Americans in the continent? Are you going to give us land? You're going to give us some of that land that got some gold and diamonds in there so we can show you how to manage that? Okay, if you're talking about that, say it. But you didn't say that. So I don't believe they're talking about that. Do you? Okay, let's keep going. They say it's a need for collaboration. So the African Union recognizes the need for collaboration between various stakeholders, including the governments, universities, churches, and the private sector, to address the legacy of slavery and its ongoing impact, says the United Nations News. Now, the call for reparations has been ongoing for decades, with the Organization of African Unity issuing a declaration demanding reparations 30 years ago, says Reuters. The recent summit in Ghana, as well as ongoing discussions at the United Nations and other international bodies, demonstrate the continued momentum behind reparations movement, says the United Nations News. While the African unity's focus on reparations is a significant step, it's important to note that the Pacific of how reparations will be implemented, particularly for Black Americans, are still being developed and will likely involve complex negotiations and collaborations. This is where foundational Black Americans says, get back. We don't need your help negotiating. And you're saying this is going to be complex negotiations? Let me ask you this, and we're going to get into it. Do you know how to negotiate complex negotiations and when? That's my question. That is my question. But we're going to examine this. We're going to examine that questions and many more. So let's talk history here. Let's talk some real history. Okay, so African colonies after the Berlin Conference of 1884. Look at that map. Look at the map. Now, after the African tribes sold millions in the transatlantic slave trade, on the other side, the eastern side of Africa, a lot of those African tribes participated selling slaves to the Arabs. Okay. Now, let's look at the Berlin Conference participants. And it was signed by Britain, France, Belgium, Portugal, Spain, Germany, Italy. Now, when you look at the map, look at that map. Those are the countries that took your land and natural resources. Those same countries or same powers are getting the resources, taking the resources out your country today. And you talk about negotiation? Look here. They're getting those natural resources out your country and they're not paying fair market value for those natural resources. African Union, why don't you negotiate a good deal on getting your natural resources? Stop giving your natural resources away. You know what that does? It keeps your people poor, keeps your people in poverty, and you're only filling a few pockets in Africa. So Black foundational Americans did not ask Africans to get involved in our reparations business. We didn't ask you. We don't want your help. We definitely don't want the help of the tribes that sold millions of Africans all over the world. African Union, are you working on an apology from them? Are you working on reparations from those tribes that sold their own people. And this is why Africa right today is suffering. And it's going to continue to suffer. You know why? Because now you let the Chinese in, you let the Indians in, you let the Arabs in. You have not invited Black Americans in to get those resources. And when they come in, they take. They don't give you shit. They take. And they're not paying you what those resources are worth. So African unity, unify Africa before you start coming across to America talking about reparations. You want to get involved in our reparations. Stay in Africa and take care of Africa. You have to ask yourself, at least I ask myself, what is the goal? What is the responsibility of the African Union when certain countries want to get out of their colonial masters? They want to get rid of those colonial masters. Is the African unity, union, do they help those countries? Let's talk about that, folks. Let's talk about that. 3 countries in Central Sahel region, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, are currently experiencing significant instability and are grappling with jihadist insurgencies led by groups affiliated with Al-Qaeda. Now, the story to that is, after Libya was brought down by the colonial powers, a lot of their citizens, armed groups, went into the Sahel. Now, the question is, and there's discussions about that, who are arming these insurgents, this Al-Qaeda? Who is funding them? Who is backing them? Some people think it's the West. It's the United States, France, Britain, the colonial powers, to justify keeping military bases in their region so they can keep an eye on the resources that they, well, damn near getting cheap as hell. Okay? All right. So, check this out. The relationship between these Sahel countries and the United States have become strained, particularly in the wake of recent military takeovers and the security situation. Following the coups, these countries have opted to align themselves more closely with Russia, seeking Russia's support for their security forces and political influence. The United States has expressed concerns about these developments, and its previous counter-terrorism efforts in the region have been described as overly reliant on military strategies and potentially undermining the legitimacy of its involvement. Now, United States is supporting those colonial powers that have been kicking your ass for the last 500 years. And why isn't the African Union behind these freedom fighters? They're trying to get the colonial powers out of their countries. Shout out to Abraham Traore. Shout out to that brother and the other ones that have that same spirit of fighting, just like our 200,000 black and proud soldiers fought to get us out of slavery and to give freedom to us. Those Sahel region are doing the same thing, and the African Union does not support them. What does that tell you? The African Union support their colonizers. They have their head so far in their ass, their leaders, that they can't do nothing for their people. So, in closing, we didn't ask for the African Union help. We don't need their help. They have never done anything for us. You've got all that land and you got those resources, and you let the Chinese, Russians, and everybody else. You have never asked Black Americans. And by the way, that have invented 50,000 inventions, and by the way, are the wealthiest Black people in the world. You have not came and asked them to get some of those resources, natural resources. And if Black Americans came through there, it would be a reciprocal relationship. You don't have a reciprocal relationship with none of them. They take and they don't give you shit. I'm the Black Vivalist, and I tell it like it is. Comment if you like it, share it, subscribe. I'll see you on my next video.